Let's start with a truth you won't want to hear. You've spent years chasing something you will never catch. It's not money, it's not pleasure, it's not power, it's a void. A hole so dark and so deep that you've tried to fill it with anything life put in front of you.
Alcohol, drugs, sex, work, social media, food, even the love of the wrong people. You know it because you felt it. Every attempt fails. And yet you fall again, over and over, as if something were dragging you from within toward that abyss. Addiction is not a habit. It's not a lack of discipline. It's a scream, a silent roar that comes from the most hidden part of your soul. It doesn't matter how many times you say, "This is the last one." It doesn't matter how many calendars you cross off. It always returns. Because it's not the substance that keeps you chained, it's the void you cling to. That void has a face, an origin, a root. And even if you deny it, even if you disguise it as willpower or a cursed destiny, you know it all began long before the first drink, the first line, the first lie. Addiction is only the reflection of something much older. Tell me, have you ever felt you weren't enough? I'm not talking about not being the best at school or failing in your relationships. I'm talking about something subtler, more corrosive. The feeling that no matter what you did, no one saw you. No one embraced you with that tenderness that asks for nothing in return. No one told you, "You're fine just as you are." That poison seeps into childhood and brands itself like red-hot iron on the flesh of the soul. That's where the wound is born. A wound that has a name in the language of archetypes, the mother. Not the mother as a person, but as a symbol, as the first source of love, of nourishment, of acceptance. If that source comes distorted, broken, or absent, what remains is not simply a sad child, but an adult condemned to endlessly search for what was never given. And here's the most brutal part. Addiction is not the enemy. It's the map. It's the crooked compass that points again and again toward that primary void you never wanted to face head-on. You think you're fighting against alcohol, against cocaine, against pornography, against the screen of your phone, but in reality, you're only fighting the echo of a lost love. That's why it doesn't work. That's why every therapy that promises discipline and every motivational speech that promises willpower collapses in a matter of days. Because you're not fighting what you think, you're running from yourself. Carl Jung warned, "What we do not make conscious manifests in our lives as fate." And your fate, until now, has been to compulsively repeat the desperate attempt to fill a hole with things that could never fill it. Like trying to quench thirst with sand, like wanting to embrace a shadow. Addiction is the messenger. A cruel messenger, yes, but also the only one brave enough to show you the wound you try to deny. Do you know why you relapse? Because deep down you're not seeking pleasure, you're seeking your mother. Not necessarily the biological mother, but the archetype. That first unconditional love that tells you, yes, you exist and it's okay to exist. Every substance, every compulsive behavior is a grotesque substitute for that lost embrace. But like all substitutes, it runs out. It gives you fleeting relief, and then comes the fall. And each fall is harder because you're not facing the problem, you're only masking it with another poison. Here's what no one wants to tell you. Addiction is overcome not by fighting it, but by deciphering its message. You must dare to enter the darkness of that void, look at the face of that wound, and accept what hurts. Alcohol is not your enemy. Cocaine is not your executioner. The real executioner is that child inside you who is still waiting to be seen, to be loved, to be embraced without conditions. And as long as you don't look at him, as long as you don't rescue him, addiction will keep knocking at your door like a nocturnal visitor who never tires. Imagine for a moment that you stop seeing addiction as a sentence and start seeing it as a map. A map that points with surgical precision to the exact place you must go. The original wound. The place you never wanted to return to because it smells of abandonment, of cold, of silence. The place where you learned that to be loved you had to do something, prove something, sacrifice yourself, hide, surrender. Addiction feeds on that lie. And until you dismantle it, it will remain alive. The problem is that human beings are programmed to flee from pain. And you know it. Every time you try to meditate, discomfort appears. Every time you try to be alone in silence, anxiety arises. So you run to seek distraction, anesthesia, the substance. But the secret lies in going through that discomfort, diving into it as if it were a dark sea. Because only by embracing that wound can you transform it. It's not about killing the addiction. It's about listening to it. It's not about eliminating the void. It's about reconciling with it. Jung spoke of the shadow, that part of us we hide, we bury, we fear to show. Addiction is the shadow turned into habit. It's the shadow that has become routine. And the only way to overcome it is not to deny it, but to integrate it. When you look at it, when you accept it, when you say, yes, I'm broken, yes, I'm hungry for love, yes, I wasn't seen the way I needed to be, then the spell begins to break. Because what you accept transforms, what you deny enslaves you. Now imagine the void ceasing to be an enemy and becoming a teacher. That void that frightens you so much, that hole you thought was cursed, is actually the doorway to your wholeness. The mother wound doesn't disappear by ignoring it. It disappears when you turn it into a space of compassion. Because what you sought in every drink, in every line, in every screen, wasn't pleasure, it was love. And that love, believe it or not, can still be born within you. Not from your mother, not from a partner, not from a drug, from you. Here lies the most brutal paradox. The addiction you hate so much is, in reality, the most honest message from your soul. It screams at you, look at me, go back to the origin, embrace the child you once were. It's no coincidence that relapse appears when you feel the most empty, when you are farthest from yourself. Because addiction is not punishment, it's the sign. The map that insists, here is the wound, here is what you need to face. The real work is not quitting the drug or stopping the behavior. It's daring to sit in front of yourself with the lights off and listen to that inner cry that was never comforted. And then, slowly, begin to build within you what you never received outside. The day you do, addiction will lose its power, because you will no longer need substitutes, because you will have found the source, because you will have transformed the shadow into light. I know, you don't want to hear it. It's easier to believe that addiction is an external curse, a demon that enters your body. But the truth is more unsettling. Addiction is you. It's your wound trying to save you, even if it does so in the clumsiest, most destructive way. It's your soul screaming silently that something inside is still bleeding. And until you listen to it, the nightmare will repeat itself. Ask yourself, what is it that you're really seeking when you consume, when you escape, when you drown in compulsion? What face do you see in that fleeting instant of relief? If you have the courage to answer, if you can withstand the vertigo of looking back and recognizing the truth, then you've already taken the first step towards liberation. Because healing doesn't come by fighting addiction, but by embracing the wound that gave birth to it. And here's the last warning. This path is not comfortable. You're going to cry what you never cried. You're going to feel the weight of an abandonment you've been hiding for decades. But when you go through it, when you reconcile with that truth, the void will stop being a monster and become a sacred space. Because there, in the very place where your addiction was born, your freedom can also be born. And what if I told you that addiction is not only an emotional wound, but also an unconscious ritual? Think about it. Every time you fall into compulsion, you're not simply consuming a substance or repeating a behavior, you are recreating an inverted sacred act. Like a dark priest, you repeat a ceremony that connects you to that primary void. The lit cigarette, the poured drink, the prepared line, the unlocked screen, all follow the same pattern. A preparation, a surrender, a trance. And in that trance, what you're seeking is not pleasure, but communion. A twisted communion, yes, but communion nonetheless. Human beings have always needed rituals to deal with the invisible, to make contact with what they do not understand. The problem is that when maternal love is missing, when that archetype is absent or distorted, we invent a parallel ritual that tries to return what was lost. That is addiction, a secret cult to the void. Look closely at your life. Every relapse has an order, a personal liturgy that you repeat as if under a spell. What does this mean? It means your psyche is trying to build a bridge to the divine, but it's doing so with contaminated materials. Addiction is not only a wound, it is also a misdirected prayer. You are praying to the shadow instead of praying to the light. Jung said that when an instinct doesn't find its healthy expression, it becomes destructive. And here is the proof. Your need for connection, for love, for transcendence has been hijacked into a rite that leads nowhere. And what would happen if you could transform that ritual? Not eliminate it, but redirect it. Because it's not about emptying your life of symbolic acts, but about filling it with new symbols that give back what addiction stole from you. You cannot simply stop consuming. You need to create a space where that impulse toward the absolute has a real outlet. The problem is, no one teaches you this. Everyone talks about willpower, about discipline, about resistance. But few understand that the root of addiction is spiritual. If your soul doesn't find a healthy altar, it will keep kneeling before the bottle, before the needle, before the screen. There is something even darker. Addiction feeds on secrets. The silence in which you hide your pain, the mask with which you smile at the world while inside you're collapsing. That's what keeps compulsion alive. The secret is its oxygen. Because as long as you stay quiet, the wound will not be shared, will not be seen, will not be embraced. And without witnesses, the monster grows. That's why you feel that the more you hide your struggle, the stronger it becomes. Because addiction thrives in darkness, but weakens in the light. When you confess, when you reveal, when you dare to expose your wound, something in the spell breaks. The secret stops being a weapon against you and starts becoming a bridge to others. Here lies a fundamental point. The mother as a symbol is not only a personal figure, it's also collective. We live in a culture that doesn't know how to nurture, that doesn't know how to hold. We grow up in societies that demand we produce, compete, win, but that rarely teach us how to receive unconditional love. In this sense, we are all symbolic orphans. We all share that maternal lack that pushes us toward forms of escape. And some end up in visible addictions, others in invisible addictions. Obsession with success, dependence on recognition, the compulsive need for external validation. The poison is the same. It only changes masks. What's disturbing is that the more you try to fill that hole with substitutes, the bigger it becomes. Because every time you repeat the addictive ritual, You reinforce the lie that the void must be feared and covered up. But if you look at it from another angle, the void is not the enemy. The void is the womb, the fertile space where something new can be born, the darkness where the seed germinates. The paradox is brutal. What you fear most is also the only thing that can set you free. And here comes another revelation that may shake you. The maternal archetype does not heal by waiting for someone to give it back to you, but by embodying it yourself. Yes, you heard that right. You, who were the abandoned child, have to become your own mother. That means learning to nourish yourself, to sustain yourself, to embrace your shadows without demanding that they disappear. It means looking at yourself with the tenderness you never received. It's not a comfortable path, because it requires accepting that no one is going to rescue you, that there will be no miraculous return to the lost womb. But it is also the only real way out, to give birth to yourself. Addiction then becomes a mirror that reflects what you have not yet dared to give yourself. If you seek substances, it's because you still don't know how to console yourself. If you lose yourself in compulsive behaviors, it's because you still don't know how to care for yourself. The day you learn, the ritual will change. Not because the compulsion disappears like magic, but because you will have a new altar on which to place your need for connection. And that altar can be silence, art, nature, meditation, writing, whatever returns you to the origin without destroying you. Think about this. What if your addiction were actually a brutal training for discovering your true spirituality? What if every fall had been the cruelest way of preparing you to awaken? It may sound strange, even offensive, but it's the truth no one dares to say. Behind every addiction beats a search for the sacred. And when that search finds its true channel, compulsion loses its power. Because you no longer need to look outside for what you've finally discovered inside. The question now is, will you have the courage to become your own healer? Can you withstand the vertigo of facing the void and discovering that inside it there is not death, but birth? Because in the end, addiction is not a condemnation. It is an invitation. An invitation to descend into the underworld of your psyche, to face the ghosts of your inner mother, and to return with the fire of self-compassion in your hands. That fire is the only thing that can illuminate your darkness. That fire is what transforms the wound into a portal, the shadow into a teacher, the addiction into a map. But stop for a second and think about this. What if addiction were, in fact, an armor? Yes, an armor your psyche created to protect what is most vulnerable in you. It may destroy you slowly, it may make you lose relationships, money, health, but behind all that there is a hidden purpose, to prevent anyone from touching that primary wound again. Addiction is brutal, but it works like a guardian. A clumsy, cruel guardian, yes, but a guardian nonetheless. Because without that shell, maybe you would have broken completely. And here appears the terrifying paradox. What has hurt you the most is also what, in some way, kept you alive. And here is the dilemma. How do you let go of something that destroys you, when at the same time it was the only thing that kept you from sinking before? That's why the path is not to rip addiction out like a tumor, but to thank it and release it. Because even the darkest thing has a function in the architecture of the soul. Here's where something very few people understand comes into play: the relationship between addiction and identity. What you consume, what you repeat, what chains you, little by little begins to define who you believe you are. You tell yourself, I'm an alcoholic, I'm a drug addict, I'm a workaholic. And those words become the strongest prison. The substance is no longer just a habit, It's a label that embeds itself in your skin. But that label is a lie. Because before the first drink, before the first needle, before the first night of compulsion, you already existed. You weren't born an addict, you became one. And if you became one, it means you can transform again. Identity is not carved in stone, but addiction convinces you it is. It makes you believe you are your cage, when in reality, you are the one holding it up. The most disturbing thing is how society reinforces that lie. We live in a world that needs labels: alcoholic, depressed, anxious, dependent. And those labels become invisible chains. Do you know why? Because when you accept that that's what you are, you stop asking what lies beneath. No one invites you to explore what originated the compulsion. They only invite you to identify with it. It's comfortable for the system. You are this and that's it. But the uncomfortable, the truly liberating, is to remember that addiction is only a symptom, not your essence. Your essence is buried, but not destroyed. Now think about something even more unsettling. What about the dreams you never fulfilled? What about the bottled-up rage, the stifled desires, the passions you extinguished to fit in? All those repressed fragments of yourself pile up in what Jung called the shadow. And addiction becomes the channel through which that shadow expresses itself. Every excess, every compulsion, is a clumsy mask of a true desire you didn't dare to live. That's why the path to healing is not just to stop consuming, it's to dare to live what you've hidden. Because if you don't give outlet to your authenticity, the shadow will keep seeking shortcuts. And those shortcuts always lead to the same thing: compulsion, emptiness, downfall. The trap is that we confuse control with freedom. We believe that if we manage to control the substance, we'll be free. But that is an illusion. True freedom is not born from control, but from integration. It's not about containing the storm, but about learning to dance with it. And for that, you need to open the door to the parts of yourself you have exiled. Because addiction feeds on exile, on every denied emotion, on every silenced desire, on every repressed tear. The cure is not in tightening the leash, but in releasing what the leash tries to hide. And here I want to take you to an even deeper ground: time. Addiction distorts your relationship with time. When you are inside it, only the immediate present exists. The drink, the dose, the click on the screen. Everything else disappears. The future doesn't matter. The past is erased. It's an artificial present, a present that devours. And this reveals another truth. Addiction is also a desperate attempt to escape the weight of time. When the past hurts too much and the future scares too much, the mind clings to the only refuge it finds: a fleeting instant of anesthesia. But that instant is a prison that tears you away from the continuity of your life. The paradox is that the only path to free yourself from the toxic present of addiction is to learn to reconcile with the past and to trust the future. The past with its wound, the future with its uncertainty. It's not about forgetting them, but about integrating them. Because as long as you run from time, time will devour you. But when you accept it, when you embrace your story and open your arms to the mystery of what's to come, compulsion loses meaning. You no longer need to run because there is nothing left to hide. Now tell me, do you realize what this means? It means that addiction, more than an enemy, is a language. A brutal language that your soul uses to tell you what you didn't hear in any other way. Every relapse is a word. Every void is a sentence. Every compulsion is an entire paragraph written on the skin of your life. And that language will not go silent until you read it, until you translate it, until you integrate it. The question is, will you keep seeing it as punishment, or will you dare to listen to it as revelation? And here we reach the point where everything you've heard starts to take shape. Because after crossing the wound, after deciphering the ritual, after facing the guardian, there remains one final revelation. Addiction is not overcome with strength, it is transcended with meaning. What keeps you chained is not the substance, it's the absence of purpose. When life has no direction, addiction becomes the compass, even if it points towards the abyss. But when you find a greater meaning, compulsion fades because you no longer need it. It's like a shadow that dissolves at dawn. It doesn't disappear because you fight it. It disappears because the light turns on. And that light is purpose, the inner fire, the reason why you choose to keep breathing even when it hurts. And now that we've made it this far, before we continue, I want to present the following to you. Our book, The Formula of Awakening, is now available. Do you feel like there's something inside you that wants to awaken, but you don't know where to start? Then I invite you to transform your way of thinking, and with it, your way of living. Discover who you can become. Start today. The link to get the ebook is in the first pinned comment of this video. Grab your copy now at a great price. With that said, let's continue with the video. And here is the final twist. Purpose is not something you must find outside. It's not a hidden treasure. It's not in a perfect future or in an impossible goal. It's in you, in that very void that scared you so much. That hole was not a curse. It was a seed waiting to be watered. The seed of your authenticity. Stop searching outside for what can only bloom inside. Because the true victory is not defeating addiction, it is turning it into a teacher. When you understand its language, when you thank its function, when you receive the message it was hiding, then at last you can let it go. And in that instant, the wound transforms into a scar, and the scar into a symbol that you survived, that you descended into hell and came back with a fire of your own. So now I throw you a brutal invitation. In the comments, write a sentence that sums up what touched you most today. A sentence of your own, authentic, born of your shadow and your light. Write it as a pact with yourself, as a reminder that this video was not mere entertainment, but a mirror. And if you want to keep exploring these uncomfortable truths, subscribe. Because what's coming will not be easy, but I promise you it will be real, without masks, without sweeteners. And I'll say goodbye with something you may not have expected. I don't want you to remember me. I want you to remember what awoke in you while you listened to me. Because I, in the end, am only a voice. What matters is what resonates in your silence when the video ends. So turn off the screen, stay alone with yourself, and listen to the echo. That echo is yours, not mine. And if you can withstand it, if you can embrace it, you will have taken the first step toward your own freedom. Now tell me, will you dare to listen to it?